Ashleigh from Sweet Dreams Bake Shop, and today I'm going to be sharing with you the 10 fears that I had when I was working as an at-home baker. So let's get into it. Fear number one, not getting the order right. And this is something that is so common when you're doing a lot of orders at once and when you're first starting out. So I'm happy to say that most of these mistakes that I made where the order didn't come out exactly right was because I was still learning and it was still the beginning. But trust me, when I got really good at this and I was working at a commercial bakery, I still made mistakes. And sometimes it's just a lack of communication. Now, the reason that we have most of these fears with at-home bakeries is because we're it. We're the only communicator. We're the only person that was responsible for writing down all of the details. So I have had one or two instances where I didn't get the flavor right, or I did the sizing wrong, or maybe it just didn't come out like somebody envisioned. Now, not all the time was this my fault, but you still fear it. You still kind of fear that moment when you're handing that cake over to the person and you kind of try to gauge their expressions, wondering, how do you feel about that cake? And nothing is worse than when they give you a very neutral expression. And some people just don't have a lot of emotion. So sometimes they are really inwardly happy with what you did, but they don't say anything. But sometimes they're ecstatic over the most simplest of cakes, and that's awesome. But the worst is when you've done something wrong and they are unhappy with that. So I've had nightmare upon nightmare about that particular thing. My second fear is I always have a fear that something other than the ingredients is going to make it into the cake or cookies or whatever pastry I am making. I have long hair, and I've actually always had super long hair. This is the shortest my hair has been in the past decade. My hair used to be like down to my waist, and no matter how much I would put it up, I would see a stray hair here or there. Now, I could have worn a hairnet, which sometimes I did resort to netting my hair with that little bun cover thing, and because I was so paranoid and I was so afraid that hair was going to end up in the food, or worse, I was afraid that there would be other things that would end up in the food that would cause it to be unfood safe. I mean, most of us who are working at an at-home bakery don't have multiple kitchens, although I do now, but most of us don't have that when we're starting out, and maybe we just might never have that. So chances are you're doing a lot of the home cooking that you do for your family in your kitchen as well. So that was a huge fear of mine. So whenever I would do the baking of any sort, I would make sure to completely clear the kitchen out and not have any other kitchen work going on, which is in line with food safety standards, but you know, life happens. I have to say that luckily when there has been hair detected, it was usually in something like my sister's dessert and not an actual customer's. So thank goodness for that. My next fear was running out of ingredients. I was always afraid that I would run out of a particular item that maybe isn't sold in regular stores. Not only that, but when you have kids, you can't just get up and run and go out to the store to go pick something up. It needs to be carefully planned about when you're going to go shopping. But worse than that is when you have a specialized item that you can only buy from a specialty cake store, and the specialty cake store that I go to is closed on Sundays. So if I had a panic on a Sunday, that was it for me. My next fear was wrong date, wrong time. I haven't had this happen to me a lot at my at-home bakery, but when I was working in a commercial bakery, oh my goodness, the amount of wrong time, wrong date did happen more than I would like to admit. So, you know what I'm talking about. You're working on a cake, you think it's gorgeous, you've executed it perfectly, it looks exactly like the picture, you know you've got the flavor right, and you've had a taste and it tastes amazing. You look down at your order form and you see, oh, it's for next Saturday. That is honestly one of my biggest nightmares ever, when you put in so much work into a cake. And on average, a cake that has a lot of detailing, a lot of fondant detailing, is probably going to take you all day long. Especially if you're baking your cakes from scratch. That means that you've done all that baking and all of that work for your filling for nothing, because you can literally do nothing with that cake, especially if it's something super specialized that you can't just resell. My next fear, wedding cakes. Wedding cakes of all types freaked me out. And there's a big reason for that. I mean, I love being part of someone's special day. It is so cool being able to see the bride and groom just be so thrilled with what you've given them. But the thing with wedding cakes is that you generally are going to be delivering them, dropping them off, and the bride and groom won't see them until that literal moment when it's the time to cut the cake. So it's a little bit nerve-wracking, and I would just have nightmares about worrying about how they felt about their cake. Not only that, but I also worried about stacking any cakes on site. Generally, this is for wedding cakes. So if you cover a cake with fondant and you do it maybe a day in advance, you kind of form a little crust with your fondant. It's not going to be as pliable as when you first laid it out. So if you don't have your cake properly supported and you try to stack that cake on top, you're going to develop cracks. And on a wedding day, you can't do much to cover it up. And a lot of wedding cakes nowadays, the trend is that everything is super simplistic and smooth, so you really can't add too much onto it either. So that always panicked me. I mean, somehow I think I made it through about 60 wedding cakes and nothing crazy happened. Everything seemed to turn out. But when you stack that cake on and you see crack, 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 it is a very, very scary feeling. And you're wondering, are they gonna see it? Is somebody going to see it? For the most part, the weddings that I had made wedding cakes for are quite dark, so I think they all turned out okay. But to this day, I still have wedding cake fear. It doesn't mean I won't make them for family and friends, it just means that I have the inner fear. Now, when you're making a lot of orders, it's super important to stay on top of things. So I would make things in advance. Hate to break it to you, but sometimes your cake decorator does things in advance. And when I would make these things in advance sometimes, things would happen overnight. Now, because the temperature is now really controlled in my new house, and I have air conditioning control and everything, nothing weird has happened here. But in my other house, where there was no real control over the temperature, sometimes I would just have a nightmare cake. You know, you cover the cake, it looks gorgeous when you go to sleep, you wake up, there's a bubble. And I know that these things happen because of temperature differences. The problem is that you don't know when these things are going to happen, because sometimes you leave a cake overnight and it would be completely fine. But other times you could leave a cake overnight, spike in temperature or drop in temperature, all of a sudden you've got cracked cakes all over the place, and it was just a nightmare. Same thing would happen with cookies too, but not with my new cookie trick. So if you want to check out that video, you can go to the corner there so that you know how to fix it. But I would have issues of piping sugar cookies and then waking up the next morning and be like, I'm ready to package them and send them off, and then there's color bleed in there. Yeah, total nightmare. This whole thing is a video of nightmares, so that's to be expected. Speaking of wedding cakes, since most wedding cakes are tiered wedding cakes, they need to be properly supported. And sometimes you don't have the luxury of stacking on site. Maybe you're just doing a delivery, maybe you're doing a pickup where somebody from the bridal party or somebody that's handling all of those tasks for the bride and groom are coming to pick up the cake from your place. That means that you have to make sure that cake is totally, totally supported. And I would just have nightmares about unsupported cakes. Sometimes, no matter how well you support things, no matter how well you've done it, there can be temperature differences that do cause a little bit of a shift. Not a huge shift, it's a shift that most cake decorators can really fix quite easily, but the average person that's coming to pick up a cake might not be able to fix it that easily themselves. I always found that buttercream cakes, that were stacked and were just going to be picked up were very scary, because if it was a hot day, which most weddings are in the summer months here, so it's very, very scary if you don't have the proper support. Now, for the most part, there are things that you can do to avoid that type of issue, but you still have that underlying fear, even after you've done it multiple times. I've done cakes 6 tiers high, and I've supported them and nothing has happened, but that fear for some reason just doesn't go away, especially when you're making cakes for business. How bad would it be if your cake toppled over? Oh! I don't know about you guys, but I have a huge fear of getting sick in general. I just don't want to be sick. I don't think anybody out there really likes being sick. But the reason that I'm afraid of being sick as an at-home baker is A, you really don't want to spread anything to anybody, and B, you want to make sure that you're getting all of your orders done. And I've talked about this before, how it's really important to network so that if something does happen, then you have backup. But sometimes your backup doesn't work and your backup doesn't work. So it is a kind of a fear of mine, or was a fear of mine, to get sick or have some sort of family emergency and then drop the ball. Luckily, never happened to me, but it doesn't mean that I still didn't think about it all the time. But I had an incident happen to me very early on in my caking and cookie career, and I was still living at my parents' house, and I had left this meringue tower kind of sitting out, and I was using it for some sort of wedding fair. And what happened was it got so hot that it kind of melted the meringue just a little bit, and then it cooled down and it rained. And when that happens, ants come. And I had a huge ant infestation. It was literally just a nightmare. I had ants crawling all over my meringue tower, and then consequently I had all of my baking stuff set up in the basement, so the ants were everywhere. I cried for hours trying to get rid of these ants, which really at the time my husband was my boyfriend, and he was helping me just clean them, and my mom was trying to help me clean them. Everybody was trying to help me clean them, but these ants just would not go away. But I had such a fear that the ants would end up in people's product, or that I would not be able to finish the orders because I didn't have a safe space to work in. It was a really crazy time. It's never happened again, but the fear is real. I am still afraid of an ant infestation. And my final fear, getting a bad review. And this kind of links hand in hand with my very first fear, getting the order wrong or having somebody not be very happy with my order. If someone's really upset with you, they're probably going to leave you a bad review. Now, I didn't really have to go through this because I actually didn't enable any stars or reviewing on my Facebook page, and I wasn't really that type of big in the social media world. So luckily at the time, I didn't have to deal with any issues, and quite frankly, in my own at-home bakery business, I think I received maybe 1 or 2 complaints over the whole course of me doing this. So although I didn't really have to undergo that experience of getting a bad review, the fear was there. I was always afraid that someone would write something bad about me, which is super weird because the people that I actually made cakes for and cookies for were the loveliest of customers. And I will say that people do give people that are at-home bakers a little bit of a break, because inevitably your prices will be a little bit cheaper than a shop, and you're also only one person, so what are they gonna do? Now, the reason that I think all these fears were so great for me when I was working as an at-home baker is probably because being an at-home baker, you are by yourself, unless you're in a partnership. But I think that's really rare. I think it's really rare for 2 people that don't live together be working together. So it's just that you have all of these responsibilities and nobody's really there to catch you if something goes wrong. It's great to have people in the community to help you, but in general, when things are going wrong, when you're falling behind, when maybe you're not going to get an order done on time, then it's you. It's all you that has to pick up the pieces. So yes, there are fears that come with anything. Any at-home business is going to be a little bit scary. But all those fears never really stopped me from doing what I love. I continued to do it for a really long time, and the only reason I don't do it now is because I'm really trying to focus on YouTube, and I also have 2 kids and a full-time job. So I'm just really trying to focus on being the best at that and making sure that I'm uploading daily. So I know I didn't give you any solutions to these fears or how to prevent these nightmares from coming true, but if you catch me on Fail Friday this week, I'm going to show you all of the solutions to some of these fears. Thanks so much for watching, guys. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe if you want to be part of this Sweetie fam. Right now, like I said, I'm uploading daily, so make sure you hit that notification bell so you know when I upload. Also, please comment, request, or ask a question. I really love hearing from you guys. It is so cool to see people starting to do things from my video and trying them out. You know, as a new YouTuber, it's really, really cool to see this. Bye!